Okay, well, thanks everyone for coming. My name is Jorge. I work at Sysdig, and this is probably one of the most difficult talks I have ever given. This can be very polemic, and it was easy to speak a lot about Sysdig, but I wanted to do it like more generic, more about what should be Prometheus, not for Sysdig. Obviously, I'll talk some details about Sysdig, but more for any monitoring vendor out there. But first of all, probably we should think, well, what's a monitoring vendor? And I was looking at the ecosystem, and I could see at least three kinds of monitoring companies working around Prometheus. People who started, or companies who started doing like more traditional monitoring, companies who built databases, and they started to or they expanded into the monitoring side of things, and companies that started after Prometheus and used Prometheus as their base or base technology. I'm going to focus on the first one, first of all, because they probably fits into that category, but also because it's probably the most challenging sector. And next, we need to talk about what's Prometheus. I'm pretty sure everyone here knows what's Prometheus, but when we talk to the general audience, not the folks here, Prometheus means many things. It's a metric server, a time series database, and should be only that. But in reality or in practice, it means a few other things. An entire monitoring stack built from many different components that they have different names. But we understand that as a Prometheus as well. A metrics interface, and we just saw that, like Prometheus metrics becoming open metrics. And also a way to instrument your code, the Prometheus library. So there are many things that we just get together under the Prometheus name. So let me talk to all these things that Prometheus means and how can, as a monitoring vendor, approach those different areas. As a monitoring vendor, when I had to provide my customers a way to implement custom metrics, I had a bunch of different options. I have JMX for those who were using Java, StatZ, recently even XBars for people using Go. And what most of the companies used to do is to provide their own API, and then either the company had to maintain a set of libraries for different languages, or the end users had to do their own thing, which was a pain in the ass, but not for the customer, but also for everyone. Like the software vendor had to maintain a huge code base with very little value because it was not differentiating from any other vendor. Everyone had to have metrics. But the user had to basically interface with different vendors if he was switching vendors or was using multiple tools. Like imagine instrumenting a code with two different libraries because in your organization you have two different monitoring systems. A pain in the ass, really. And while you change language, then the library is not available anymore. And recently, with the adoption of microservices, Kubernetes, all these new technologies, some of these instrumentation or metric formats, they didn't work. There were some attempts to fix these problems. Metrics 2.0, Datadog monitoring company came up with an extension of StatZ, Docker StatZ, that added some tagging. But it seems that Prometheus Metrics has solved this problem. Prometheus Metrics, it's evolving as we just saw on Open Metrics, so I'm not going to go deep there. And there are even other projects like implementations or ways to expand standardization farther from custom metrics into tracing and other things. So all these, it's really, really good for a monitoring vendor point of view. So having a de facto industry standard for exposing metrics is great because we can forget about our work, which is a pain in the ass. And we see that cloud native applications start to support these metrics out of the box, like tons of, or the different components in Kubernetes. They expose directly metrics using these. So Kubestate metrics as well. Different services like Istio, Core DNS, like all these developers of these projects, they directly expose their internal metrics using one of these endpoints. So for a monitoring vendor, there is very little work to do. For a developer point of view, you instrument once, you support many different vendors. Either if you are using a open source project or you are using a commercial vendor, would be great just to instrument once. If you have an infrastructure monitoring tool and then you have an APM monitoring tool and both support the same format, you can have the same metrics in two different places. That might be great. So for me, like one of the first things I thought about, well, what's Prometheus Metrics? For me is, can we kill checks, exporters, scripts, like they just message JSONs and they are a pain in the ass to maintain? So that's been great. Thanks to the community for doing that. The monitoring is stuck. Like as I was saying before, Prometheus is the Prometheus server, but also some components like Alert Manager, Grafana exporters, push gateway, and well, this is actually a feature. Many organizations, they are adopting Prometheus because they can build the monitoring system exactly as they need. We were looking, or we could see this yesterday, where we have like 3-4 different long-term storage options. This is great. Different organizations, they have different needs. And we should acknowledge that from a monitoring vendor perspective. And at SysDig, we thought that the first touch points to start was number one, the visualization, and number two, the metric collection, because these are the parts where most of the users interact with the monitoring system. So we saw that Grafana was becoming a very, very popular interface. And when talking to our customers, talking to people evaluating SysDig, we saw that some people, they were happy with Grafana and they didn't want to change. So we said, all right, so what we need to do is to give people the power to decide what kind of interface they want to use. So if they want to use Grafana, that's great. Let's create a data source so they can get SysDig metrics over there. But some of the people, they said, well, we love your Explore UI, where you can navigate through your different infrastructure, and we want to use that. And people within the same organization, different people, they have different opinions. So as long as they have all the information there, they can use different UIs, and that's fine. With the metric collection, it's a very similar story. In a standard Prometheus stack, you have CAdvisor, Node Exporter, QState metrics, different sources of metrics and information. And at SysDig, we have a completely different approach. And actually, SysDig started doing this. SysDig started as a Linux tracing or Linux system called tracing tool. It was open source, and people, they really liked the technology and they wanted to pay to get more value out of that. So we created a monitoring company out of that first open source project. And our agent is very different. Like, it has an eBPF system called tracing, gives you per process metrics. It works really well with short-lived processes. It's container agnostic. Like, people use it with many other things that they are not just Docker. And the instrumentation is great. But they say, well, we love Prometheus and we don't want to change that. Well, that's a reality. We need to accept it. But we have an awesome technology there. What we can do? Well, provide a way to those users that they want to work with Prometheus, but they love our technology, to use that within their system. So our agent, it's also going to expose metrics as a Prometheus endpoint. So a Prometheus server can scrape all these metrics that we collect in a very unique way and have them in their Prometheus server. Finally, the Prometheus server itself, the time series database. Some organizations, they want to run Prometheus, and they run it in very different ways. Like, it's their only monitoring tool. In some others, they have it running alongside other monitoring tools. Well, if they have that need, SysDig decided that we just should offer support for open source Prometheus. If someone needs help with Prometheus, we'll help them. But there are other ways to provide help, because there are some challenges that we saw: scalability issues, backends, long-term storage, operations. And the answer to all these challenges has been, well, first of all, offer hosted Prometheus backend. Again, in this talk yesterday of long-term storage, we mentioned or we saw that there is a bunch of different companies offering hosted Prometheus. But, well, we took in a slightly different approach, and we have our own backend that has some different features. It's based on Cassandra, but provides scalability, long-term storage, operation, and permissions, which is a highly demanded feature on the enterprise world. But again, we saw that how people can interact with our backend. That's like, I don't want to be completely locked into your backend. I have a bunch of different tools that they need to query my metrics server. And we saw, again, that within the Prometheus ecosystem, PromQL was becoming the de facto standard for querying metrics. So the obvious answer has been, well, if that's what people want, let's implement that in interface between our backend and the Prometheus ecosystem, so that works. Actually, these metrics are not only a use within a time series metric server, but also in other parts of your infrastructure. So like the latest versions of Kubernetes, they use Prometheus itself to orchestrate some parts. So we even have a custom metrics API server that talks to the SysDig backend. And that's something other vendors should do, because Prometheus is becoming like this standard interface for any metrics out there. So these are the different things we have done. I think that this is a good approach. And well, if we had to summarize this in a few ideas to take away, first of all, from traditional monitoring vendors' point of view, Prometheus has been seen as a threat, but we don't see it that way. Instead, we think it's an opportunity and has been really great to do metrics standardization. That's good for everyone. But actually, we can do more. It's just, Prometheus is just not a standard. It's a way to do more things, to scale with the ecosystem, to leverage existing tools and developments of the community, and approach new opportunities, because with new software, there are companies, people who have different needs, and they might need a vendor to help them. Not always, but sometimes they do. But like an open source community or ecosystem, it's not just about taking, it's also about giving. So contributing back to the community is important. We have started to contribute to the Prometheus server. We have 3 different open source projects. Actually, SysDig started, as I said before, as an open source project. So that's very, very important. And if we want to see this from a very, very business point of view, like open source users are not lost deals. We need to think, as a vendor, we need to make money. So we need to think how we can provide value to those users. So that's very, very important for any vendor out there. As I said, we love Prometheus. We offer support. We understood from the beginning that with the Prometheus ecosystem skyrocketing, we need to provide the value to our customers in a way that they can basically mix and match, decide them how they want to build their monitoring systems, if they want to be fully open source, or they want to leverage some parts into a vendor for visualization, for metric collection, for backend. And we also understood that there is a need to contribute back to Prometheus, but also with our visibility projects, SysDig Inspect, Falco, etc. So I don't know what's my timing. I hope it wasn't too bad. And before we move into the questions, if there are any, one of the things we are doing during PromCon is to run a completely anonymous survey. This is not lead gen. This is to get to know more and publish it, obviously, about how people and organizations are using Prometheus. So we have a 13, 14 questions survey that you can browse here, or you can do it in our booth, or also be tweeting the link later. So it would be great if you can dedicate a few seconds of your time to complete that. And that's everything I had for today.
Thank you.
I hope you like it and enjoy it. Thank you.
Yep. So plenty of time for questions.
First of all, thank you for the talk. I really can identify with the philosophy. I think that's great. One thing I was wondering about is, so you have PromQL support. Are you also thinking about like alerting support? Because there's already tons of alerts out there, so people could like reuse those, right?
Yes. I think product team is working on being able to configure alerts using PromQL the same way you would do in Alert Manager. We see that many users they still prefer to use the graphical UI. I don't know exactly the details on how that's going to work. I believe both options are going to be possible.
Cool. Maybe one more question.
Yes.
So you have a separate Kubernetes provider for custom metrics, but you have PromQL support. So what made you implement the custom one when there is one that can do the PromQL query?
So the custom metrics API server, it was an early implementation. The people at the marketing team, we are very excited and very fast on writing crazy code that don't always works very reliable. And then the product team comes over and does the final implementation. But that's basically an experiment. I believe some people are using it, but we just wanted to have fun and said, hey, it's not possible that Prometheus is the only custom API metrics server out there. Let's write another one. So,
thank you.
Any more? We have plenty of time. Well, otherwise we get a longer break. Thank you very much.
Thank you.